Welcome back to the deep dive. If you're a photographer, maybe a videographer, navigating this mirrorless market, well, you know the drill. A great camera comes out, and then boom, maybe 2 years later, its successor arrives, promising, everything. And the big question, especially now in 2025, is, are those upgrades worth the extra money? Or is that original model actually the smarter buy now?
Yeah.
So our mission today is pretty focused. We're doing a real head-to-head deep dive, comparing two Canon full-frame mirrorless cameras. We got the original EOS R6 from back in 2020, and its successor, the R6 Mark II, which launched, about 28 months after. We're basically going to try and distill whether the Mark II's upgrades are essential, or if that original R6 is still a value king.
Yeah, it's that classic trade-off, isn't it? Incremental improvements versus the price drop on the older model. And what's really interesting right off the bat is, well, they look identical. Physically, you're looking at the same size, same weight, 138 by 98 by 88 millimeters, both 680 grams. Honestly, put them side by side, you probably couldn't tell them apart until you switched them on. But the first big difference on paper is the resolution. The R6, the original, has 20 megapixels, solid. But the R6 Mark II bumps that up to 24 megapixels. Yeah. That's about a 19% increase in pixels.
Okay, let's unpack this. Does that 4 megapixel difference actually mean better photos day to day, or is it just, a number on a spec sheet?
Well, yeah, that 4 megapixel jump.
Yeah.
It seems like an obvious win if you're thinking about making really large prints. Or maybe you need a lot of room to crop in later. More data is usually better, right? Especially for things like landscape or commercial stuff.
That's generally true, yeah. But here's where it gets kind of interesting, a bit counterintuitive sometimes with these camera updates. See, to fit those extra 4 million pixels onto the same size full-frame sensor, the R6 Mark II, well, it had to use smaller individual pixels.
Wait, hang on. You mean the older R6 actually has, bigger buckets for collecting light?
Exactly. The R6's pixel area, the actual physical size of each light-gathering point, is larger than the Mark II's. Think of it like a big scoop shovel versus a slightly smaller, maybe more high-tech spoon. A bigger shovel, the R6 pixel, it just gathers more light, maybe a bit faster, even if you have slightly fewer of them overall. And the implication there, especially for people shooting in really tricky conditions, is pretty important. Those larger pixels on the original R6 could mean, theoretically, a cleaner image signal, maybe slightly better low light performance, less noise, particularly when you're really pushing the ISO towards the top end.
Even though they have the same native ISO range?
Yeah, even though the native range listed is identical, 100 to 102,400. It's about the quality of the signal from each pixel at those high ISOs. It's that classic trade-off.
Sure.
Do you want maximum detail from more pixels or potentially cleaner light gathering from larger pixels?
That's a really interesting nuance. Okay, so if the R6 might have that slight edge in potential low light quality, then there's another spec where the older one seems to, on paper at least, come out ahead, the number of autofocus points. Yeah, we saw that too. It's a bit surprising. The original R6 actually has almost 6,100 focus points. That's quite a bit more coverage, numerically speaking, than the Mark II's, which is just under 4,900 points. So yeah, the R6 has this sort of brute force density advantage.
But how much does that raw number matter when you factor in the newer processing in the Mark II? Are we comparing density versus maybe smarter algorithms?
That's exactly the right question. Because while the R6 wins on the sheer number, the thing is, both cameras are absolutely top-tier performers thanks to Canon software. They both have excellent face, eye, and even vehicle tracking autofocus.
Right.
And crucially, they both focus incredibly well in very low light, down to 𝐕/6.5.
Okay, for listeners maybe not familiar, what does 𝐕/6.5 actually mean? How dark is that?
It's really dark. Think it's focusing by moonlight, maybe even starlight, or perhaps just a very dim streetlight way off in the distance. It means the camera can lock focus in conditions where you can barely see. So yeah, while the R6 has more points spread out, the R6 Mark II uses its points very effectively with newer algorithms. The focusing ends up being just as reliable, arguably even a bit smarter or stickier in some tricky real-world situations, despite having fewer points on paper.
Gotcha. Okay, let's shift gears to speed and performance. Because this feels like where the gap between them really opens up, especially for, say, action or wildlife photographers. The burst shooting specs. Well, the Mark II looks like a knockout.
It really is a huge jump. I mean, both cameras shoot at a very respectable 12 frames per second with the mechanical shutter. That's great. But switch to the electronic shutter. Well, the R6 hits a max of 20 frames per second, which is already fast. But the R6 Mark II just doubles that. It hits an incredible 40 frames per second electronically.
Gordon, that's the kind of speed that not long ago you only found in those really high-end, super expensive pro sports cameras. What does 40p's really unlock for someone who isn't, shooting the Olympics?
Well, it's not just about getting more photos. It's about capturing that absolutely perfect, fleeting moment. Think about maybe the exact instant a water droplet splashes, or capturing a hummingbird's wings just perfectly still for a split second. It gives you options you just didn't have before at this price point. Plus, the Mark II also gets you a faster maximum electronic shutter speed, 116,000th of a second, compared to the R6's 18,000th. That helps control exposure in really bright sunlight when you're shooting wide open.
Yeah, these performance upgrades aren't just about the speed while you're shooting, it's also about endurance, which, let's face it, can be a real pain point with mirrorless.
That's a big one, yeah. There's a really significant improvement in the 𝐕PA battery rating. That's the standard industry test. The original R6 was rated for about 360 shots per charge, which is okay, manageable.
Okay.
The R6 Mark II jumps way up to 580 shots per charge. That's an extra 220 photos. That's huge if you're traveling, shooting an event all day, or doing street photography and don't want to constantly be swapping batteries or worrying about running out of juice.
That battery life alone might be worth the upgrade for some people. But there's one more feature linked to performance in action that I think is, well, maybe a killer app for the Mark II.
Ah, yes. And here's where it gets really interesting for capturing those unpredictable moments. The R6 Mark II has a feature called pre-shooting buffer.
Explain that. It sounds like magic.
It kinda is. Think of it like a little time machine. The camera is constantly recording images to a temporary buffer before you fully press the shutter button down. So say you're waiting for a bird to suddenly take flight. You press the shutter the moment you see it move, but your reaction might be a fraction of a second late. With pre-shooting, the camera has already saved the half second before you fully press the button. You capture the entire sequence, even the part your reflexes missed.
Whoa.
The original R6 just doesn't have that. So for capturing truly spontaneous action, the Mark II instantly becomes the much, much better tool.
Okay, so the stills performance upgrades are significant, especially speed and battery. But the video side, this is where the Mark II seems to go from being a strong stills camera with video features to, well, a proper hybrid machine, right? It seems like it directly addresses the R6's main video weak points.
Absolutely. Two of the biggest frustrations for serious R6 video users were basically eliminated in the Mark II. First, the recording time limit. The R6 stopped recording after 30 minutes per clip.
Right. Annoying for interviews or events.
Very. You'd have to constantly monitor and restart. The R6 Mark II offers essentially unlimited video recording time, limited only by your battery or card space. That's a fundamental change for anyone doing long-form content.
And then beyond just how long you can record, there were a couple of key quality limitations, especially around higher frame rates and flexibility.
Exactly. The first big one was the crop factor when shooting 4K at 60 frames per second. The R6 had a slight but noticeable 1.07x crop. It meant your wide-angle lens wasn't quite as wide anymore.
Oh, that's frustrating.
The R6 Mark II gives you no crop at 4K 60p. Full sensor readout. What you see is what you get. You don't lose that wide perspective. That's a huge deal for videographers. Second, and this is massive for anyone serious about color grading and post-production flexibility, the original R6 couldn't output RAW video. The R6 Mark II does support RAW video recording externally.
RAW video means?
It means capturing the absolute maximum amount of image data from the sensor. Way more flexibility in adjusting colors, exposure, highlights, shadows. It's the difference between having good-looking video and having footage with true cinema-level potential in post.
And it sounds like just the general experience of shooting video is smoother on the Mark II, too. The sources mentioned some workflow improvements.
Yeah, some nice quality of life things. The Mark II added a simple, dedicated switch to go between stills and video mode. Sounds minor, but it's quick and intuitive. Much better than digging in menus. It also added lens breathing correction electronically for compatible RF lenses.
Explain lens breathing quickly.
Sure. It's when you change focus, say from something close to something far away, and the lens appears to slightly zoom in or out as the focus shifts, it can look a bit distracting or unprofessional.
Ah.
The Mark II can electronically compensate for that, making your focus pulls look much smoother and more cinematic. Plus, it bumps up the high-speed video capability 180 frames per second for slow motion compared to the R6's 122 ps.
No, it feels like we've highlighted a lot of Mark II advantages, but it's important to stress these are both really capable professional-level cameras built on the same core platform. We don't want you thinking the original R6 is suddenly obsolete if you choose that route.
Oh, absolutely not. It's crucial to remember the common ground here. Both are serious tools. They share things like fantastic in-body image stabilization, that sensor shift IS, up to 8 stops effective, which is amazing for handheld work. Both have proper weather sealing, environmental sealing. Both have dual UHS-2 card slots for speed and backup. That's professional stuff.
And they both have that fully articulating touchscreen, which is great for video in different angles, the anti-dust shutter mechanism when you change lenses, and critically proper microphone and headphone jacks for audio.
Right. And they both use the same Canon RF mount, giving you access to that whole growing ecosystem of lenses. What is it now? Nearly 70 full-frame compatible RF lenses. It's a strong system.
Yeah.
And you see this shared competence reflected in the application scores from our sources. When you compare them for different types of photography, they're often neck and neck. Both score incredibly high, like 97% for street photography and 90% for sports, mainly because that core AF system is so good in both.
So where does the Mark II edge it out in scores?
It pulls ahead slightly in things like daily use, probably due to the better battery life making it more convenient, and a bit in landscape where the extra resolution helps, but for core genres, they're both very strong.
Okay, so let's try and bring this all together. We've looked at the specs, the performance, the video. The sources crunch the numbers and give us a final score. And the verdict is pretty clear. The Canon R6 Mark II gets an overall score of 84, which puts it decisively ahead of the original R6's score of 77. The win comes down mainly to those huge video improvements, that much better battery life, and the bump in resolution.
And that 7-point score difference, while it maps pretty closely to the price difference you'll likely see in 2025, you can find the original R6 probably renewed or good used condition for around $1,800, maybe a bit less. The R6 Mark II, brand new, is sitting around $2,100, so about a $300 gap, give or take. So what does this all mean for you trying to choose?
Well, it really boils down to what you shoot most. If you are primarily a stills photographer, maybe focusing on portrait street photography, things where that absolute top-end speed or unlimited video isn't critical, and maybe you appreciate that potential tiny edge and low light from the bigger pixels, and you want to save that $300, the original R6 is still an absolutely fantastic, really capable camera and great value.
But if you're a true hybrid shooter, meaning you need strong performance in both stills and video, if you need that raw video output for serious editing, or you shoot long events and need unlimited recording time, or if you're heavily into action and wildlife where that 40p's burst and the pre-shooting buffer make a real difference, or even if you just value that significantly better battery life, then yeah, the R6 Mark II is pretty clearly the better investment. It's just more versatile, more future-proof.
So the core trade-off really crystallizes, doesn't it? It's the R6's potentially slightly better low-light pixels and more AF points on paper versus the Mark II's game-changing video features, its raw speed, and that much better endurance.
Exactly. And that leads to maybe a final thought for you to consider. When you have two cameras that are physically identical, same feel in the hand, same build, same weight, same core stabilization, how much weight should you give to the software features, the things that enhance your workflow, rather than just the raw hardware specs?
Like what specifically?
Well, the Mark II exclusively has features like in-camera focus stacking. If you do macro photography, that saves a ton of time in post-processing. It also has the newer multifunction hot shoe, which works with newer accessories like digital microphones without cables.
Right.
These are things that don't necessarily change the sensor's performance, but they can dramatically change how you actually use the camera day to day, how efficient your workflow is. So the question becomes, when you're comparing them, are you just buying the hardware specs like megapixels and frame rates? Or are you investing in the whole integrated shooting experience, the ecosystem, the workflow? Something to think about as you weigh your decision.
That's a great point to end on. Fantastic breakdown. Thanks for helping us navigate this comparison.